Okay, welcome back. So in the last part we took a look at creating this cowling here, and we also took a look at doing some repurposing of some smooth geometry. Now in this part I just want to finish both of these pieces off, and one of the things I noticed is we got one of those back there that we don't need, but also that this should really encompass the pipe. Now what I'd need is to select these inside faces and extrude them inwards, but I've already done that. In fact, I've extruded the outside faces. And because I have the history on here, I can see I still have that poly extrude face active. So if I scale this cowling down until it sort of encompasses the pipe like so, or is a much better fit there, I don't think it needs to be perfect, but just so there's not a huge kind of hole there, I should then be able to simply select this poly extrude face, go down to the extrude in Z and change that to maybe 0.4, and you'll see that it grows outwards. So that seems about perfect to me. Done. Now I want to also make sure that my thing along the bottom here also comes up to meet the pipe. So I'm just going to go into face mode and select a few faces. Maybe that one too. And extrude those upwards. So that might be a bit too far. There we go. Now I could get fancy and sort of cut a hole in that and put a ring around it, but you know, it's a very small component and I doubt anyone's ever going to shoot from here. So we should be absolutely fine on that one. I just wanted to make sure that if the model was shot from over here, there wasn't just a gaping hole in around this pipe. We wanted to make sure that that looks like the pipe is actually, you know, going into something. So if I check the reference out now, it seems we've also got a couple of little cylinder pieces that need to go in. So I'll just start with a poly cylinder. And I'll scale it down, and I'm going to just scale it by eye to the reference. I've got some reference open on another screen as well, so I can see it a bit better. And I can't really use my reference for this because I actually didn't put this piece in to mine, to the original version of this that I made, should I say. And that looks like that's just a little bit higher than that. Now we could have started with higher res geometry, and in fact I think that's a bit too big altogether really. But to be honest with you, for such a tiny component, as I'm never planning on rendering this, you know, sort of from here, then this should be fine for what we need. I'm just going to come in and chamfer that edge just to help it catch the light once again, of course. So let's see, bevel edge, there we go. Okay, that's just a tiny extra detail. In fact, I think it still might be a little too large. And let's just intersect it ever so slightly. And once again, we'll need to pull that in and duplicate it across. So Control D to duplicate. And we'll just put that one approximately the same position on the other side. Okay, so just some tiny little finishing details on that back plate, just to make it a bit more interesting. And now I want to get into how we go about taking this, because as you can see there's actually 3 of these on this image. It looks like there's 2, but there's actually another one behind there. And I want to talk about taking this lot and making it on this side and this side. So I don't want to duplicate it with Control D and then move it around by hand. That would be well, for 2 pieces it wouldn't be that bad, but you know, if I wanted 16 of these to go around, then you'd be talking pain in the backside there. So, oh, and I've just noticed when we've done that extrusion upwards, we've actually gone ahead and bisected part of our geometry, which is no good. So I'm just going to pull these in a little bit. There we go. Now I need to select all the pieces. And this would be all the pieces that I want, obviously here and here as well. and I'm going to need to group them together. I need them to have one central pivot point and to be part of the same group. So once I've selected everything, Control G. And if I bring up the outliner, you'll see now I've got a group called Group 1. So that's no good to me. I'm going to call it Pipe and Housing. So done. So now I've got this pipe and housing. I need to look at where its pivot point is situated, because if I rotate this at the moment, let's see, so just press E to rotate, it'll rotate around the center of this axis here, and that's not what I want at all. I want it to rotate along the center of this pipe. So select your group, your pipe and housing group in our case, hit hit Insert, which will allow you to move the pivot point, and then let's go into our foreview here, our front view in this case, and move the pivot point up here. Oops. So I'm actually moving the pivot point now, not the object, and I want it to be in the middle of this cylinder, which it is, and then I want it to be in the middle of this group approximately. It doesn't really matter that much, just in the middle of this cylinder will be absolutely fine. So there we go. So pivot point, center of this cylinder. Now we select our group. Whoops, not that one. We select our pipe and housing group, and we're going to go to Duplicate Special. So Edit, where are we? Edit, Duplicate Special. Let's bring up the options box. Now I'm going to want to rotate this thing in 120-degree increments, so it's already set for that. And I'm going to make 2 copies. Now by default it'll be reset settings, it'll have nothing here, but we want to rotate around X 120, number of copies 2, which will create 2 copies of this in 120-degree increments. So Duplicate Special, and there you go. That was easy. Now they appear to have come in a little bit to so Insert again to stop moving the pivot, W to move, and I'm moving the wrong one, and I'm just going to make sure this is in exactly the right position for me. There we go, done. And this one, so it just came out a little bit out of position, but basically perfect. And there you go. So that's starting to look a bit more like a Dalek attacker claw. Yeah, pretty happy with the placement of all that. We need to do this one as well. So again, I need to move the pivot point of this into the center of the thing I want to duplicate it around, which in this case is this pipe. And in order to get a better look at that, I'm going to turn on wireframe unshaded, so shading wireframe unshaded, and then I can see that I'm moving this pivot point into the middle. There we go. So again, you're just going to have to Duplicate Special, and let's say, you know, this is nice for 3 objects, but let's just edit Duplicate Special and take a look at this, and then I'll show you something else. Duplicate Special, great. So that's created the 3 in the right place, perfect. But what if I wanted sort of 20 of them? Well, let's go for Edit, Duplicate Special, and have a look. There we go. So let's do it in increments of, say, 12 degrees, and then make, let's just say 20 copies for the sake of argument. There you go. So if you're making heatsink fans on something, or you know, anything that requires large repetition of geometry around a point, in this case a pipe, that's just perfect. Okay. Now for us, we only call for a couple of copies, so I just wanted to show you that, you know, it's a very useful tool. For the Duplicate Special can be a very useful placement tool as well as duplication. So I'm just going to go back to 2 and 120, Duplicate Special. There we go. Alright, that's pretty much the entirety of the back of our object finished. Now I might come in and make some of these I might come in and make some of these chamfers slightly bigger or smaller. I just attempted to say chamfers and bevels as part of the same word, but of course they're not. So that's done the front. Now we need to look at this piece here. So easy way to create this. Let's go to our reference, and I'm going to group this whole thing and just call it claw. It'll just help me keep it organized in the outliner. Claw. Okay, and then I'm going to Control H and I'm going to hide that so I can come in and work on the reference a little easier. Now to create this shape, I'm actually going to use a polygon pipe. So let's just bring one of those in. Let's move it approximately into position, and I'm just going to rotate it 90. F to zoom in on it, and then I'm going to get it to roughly the sort of diameter that it needs to be. So we're around here really. Now the inner is too wide here, so we can go up to the attribute editor, sorry, the channel box, and make that a bit narrower, so say 0.35 maybe. There we go, perfect. And now we have to turn this into this. Now if we're going to smooth this, this becomes easier. Once again, we'll stay with this low resolution geometry. If we're going to non-smooth it and get those really crisp edges, then it becomes a problem once again of how to get this smooth curve. So again, we may repurpose some smooth geometry. And I'm just going to take this one, and I'm holding shift and I'm mouse dragging around so I get both the front and back vertex. Okay, and then I'm going to move these down. Then I will scale them out until they match kind of there and there. Okay, and now it's a case of grabbing all these vertex here and scaling them straight. So now I know they're all straight. Moving them back up to position, and now I can just actually take these two at a time and move them along the curve. So you know, we've seen drawing a curve out with a NURBS curve. You don't always have to do that. You can, when the poly is this low, just sort of do it by eye and drag some vertex around. Okay, now that curve is looking pretty good. So if we take a look at this geometry in the perspective view now, that looks pretty good. Now if I smooth it, it'll all collapse in on itself. So let's put in some edges for smoothing here. And modeling toolkit, multi-cut with control. And just zoom in a little bit. There we go, and an edge here also, and an edge here also. Let's just make sure we got one round the back and one here. Okay, so if we hit smooth now, this will look pretty good. And again, we don't quite have the hard chamfer, so we could repurpose this smooth geometry and turn it back into something with a nice chamfered edge. So, you know, it is sometimes nice to just be able to go mesh smooth. Let's put this up to a couple of smoothing levels. There we go. That might be a bit too smooth, because that's really high poly now. You can still work with it when it's this high if you should want to, but it's a pretty small component, so for me I'm going to go into the channel box and turn that smooth face divisions down to 2. That's more than enough. Now I can come in and grab a look at it on one of these views. Actually, this one should be fine. Grab the faces, there we go. Grabs the faces on one side. Let's make sure I don't have too many of those. I do, so I'm just going to okay, that's a bit annoying actually. I think I'll grab those faces all again. So let's do this with a bit of a zoom in. Sorry, my mouse has just picked this exact moment to start playing up on me. Just a second, always the way. Right, let's grab those faces there. So just those front ones, that should do it. And mesh extract. Okay, click anywhere and we should have a different object. We do. Okay, now we need to make sure it's flat. Excuse me while I just pause and give my mouse a bash on the head. Okay, there we go. Now we need to make sure it's flat. So I can do this by selecting the whole object or just selecting its vertices, selecting all the verts, whoops, and hitting R to scale and scaling them all so they are flat. Now easier to do this in this view probably. Okay, and I can see from this view that all those verts are flat and I can't actually scale in anymore now, which means they're all perfectly in line with each other. Alright, so that does this. So now we've got our high-res geometry, and this is unsmoothed. Now this is a 1 on the keyboard, so this is actually unsmoothed. Let's see if we could get rid of any of these edge loops before we come in and just convert this thing out. So that one can go. I don't need too many in here. This one, also this one probably, and I can probably take out a few more if I wanted to lower the poly count on this, but you know, retopology is really a subject for another day. This is fine for our purposes. So let's go to face mode, select all the faces, modeling tools, and extrude, and there you go. So smooth geometry that has to be smoothed, and non-smooth geometry. Okay, so for us now it's a very simple case of taking these edges, 1 and 2, yeah, perfect, and these inner ones, 1, and actually this inner edge here might be an issue, so let's just get rid of it, delete edge, and this one here is a bit close also, so delete edge. There we go, and I'll do the same on the back side, and this one, delete edge. Okay, if those edges are pressed right up against each other, it's going to make our chamfers and bevels overlap with other geometry that's in there and create nasty geometry, which we do not want. So just mesh and then edit mesh and bevel. There we go, perfect for us. Let's just make sure we're not, nope, perfect. And once again, let's just come up to offset, maybe as much as 0.5. Oh, no, sorry, not offset, fraction. Maybe as much as 0.5 on this. Get a really nice hard bevel on there. Look at that, perfect. Excellent. So this is actually quite a thin piece, whoops. And you know, I'm going to delete the history on this. So edit, delete by type. There we go, mouse is going again. Delete by type, history, and modify center pivot. And then I can come in and make this a thinner component and get it placed on our claw here. So don't need that one anymore. And once again, we've taken a piece of smooth geometry and repurposed it. Now, if you're interested in retopologizing this thing, you could probably come in here and take out a lot of this geometry that's now not really necessary. So delete edge, don't need any of that. Okay, and do the same thing on the back. Now, we could have done this before, but you know, it's just going to create a lower polygon version of this. Okay, and it makes no difference to your edges at this point. Whoops. That's the left one. There we go. So that's looking okay. Let's just check it out. Okay, taking some of those edges out, it's not been great for us. Some of them are actually holding the shape of the circle a little bit. So I reckon these inside too. And you know, this is good enough for our purposes. We really shouldn't need these extra edges here. They shouldn't be holding anything at all together. I think I must have last time accidentally selected something I shouldn't have and hit delete because I had some weirdness going on, but you know, that should be fine. Alright, let's get it in place on the model. So if we open up our outliner, which I've got here, otherwise just window outliner, select our claw and hit Shift H to unhide it. I should then be able to come in with the piece I just created and get it lined up with the reference. Okay, and let's focus in on it this way. And okie dokie. That's going to be approximately in the center of this cube. So let's just do a wireframe unshaded so I can see. And it should be around there, I should think. Okay, and that's going to require a bit of rotational line up. There we go. And I might even pull down, because I don't want this piece of geometry to bisect. So if I go and change the axis of my movement tool now, by double clicking the movement tool and putting the move axis onto object, I'll then be able to just move it up and down so I can see where that bisection comes in. So I don't really want it to bisect that much. And in order to help me out here a little bit, I'm going to select some of the vertex from down here, hit B to turn on soft selection, and I should just be able to move it gently into place. Let's see, there we go, and do the same here. Now obviously I'm being fairly imprecise here, and really you should take a little bit of extra time with this. But because I don't want to keep everyone watching me, you know, get the perfect placement, I'm going to call that good enough. And it will just really help when we render to show that this is a piece that's kind of been welded onto this piece. If we just bisect that in there, it looks a bit like, you know, it's all one continuous piece. Sometimes a bisection is fine. Obviously we've got some here. And you don't always have to do this, but just, you know, the option is available. You can always shape things to the surface. Yeah, let's make that a little bit thinner, even more. And then Control D to duplicate. We've got another one that comes out here. And our claw will go in the middle of these two. Now, I'm making an educated guess as to how wide that would be, but I think it's about right. Again, when I'm doing a tutorial, I don't like to spend hours and hours and hours making sure everything is perfectly aligned. I do that in between the parts, but yeah, as you can see, these are pretty well matched up with each other. Okay, so now we just need to make our inner bits. Let's have a look. It appears to be one large washer, one kind of small washer, and one bolt that goes through the middle. So that's really not that difficult. Again, it's just poly pipes. Okay, let's move this up here. And let's get this about into the center. Okay. And I want to get my placement quite good here. And I just want it to bisect a tiny bit, because then I'm going to bevel it, and that will appear that the surfaces aren't quite mated like you'd expect to see in a kind of bolt and washer situation. So let's come to the attribute editor, the channel box, sorry, and let's change the inner thickness of this to say 0.2, maybe 0.22. There we go, that should be about right. And Control D, and then I'm going to scale this one down so it matches this one just a little bit smaller. Okay, perfect. And you know, I think with these pieces we're going to be absolutely fine, because they're going to be so small. I'm turning B to turn off soft selection. We're going to be absolutely fine just to grab them, bevel them, and then smooth them. Whoops. There we go. So edit mesh bevel, and that's too big. So fraction point, let's say 0.5. That's fine. Actually, maybe a bit bigger, 0.8, and segments up to 2 because we're going to smooth it. And let's smooth it, and that will be perfectly fine for this kind of operation. You could again have started with higher res geometry, of course, or with geometry with more subdivisions, but I think for this will be okay. So I'll press G to bevel again, and I'll need to turn this segments to 2 and fraction to 0.08 maybe. And there we go. Okay, and smooth, and there we go. Now I'm going to grab this and I'm going to scale it to size. So just like so, perfect. And this one, scale to size, there we go, perfect. And because we have smoothing now, these have shrunk a tad, so I'll just scale up a little bit. Same with this one. There we go. So that gives us that, looking rather nice. And you know, I'll do the bolt now. That one's a bit too far, hanging out. There we go. I'll do the bolt that goes to the middle now, because I would assume there'd be some sort of bolt holding these claws. So again, let's do this one same way we did with the others, but just for the sake of argument, because this one's going to stick out a little bit more than the washers, I'm going to just hold J to get that to lock its rotation. I'm going to start with higher res. Okay. Whoops. And F to focus in on it. Can't quite see where I'm moving it at the moment. And let's use the appropriate view to get that in the middle of here, like so. Okay. So can't actually get a good look at it on that view for some reason. My viewport's just playing silly beggars. Okay, in a little bit, and now this one, and shift select this one and bevel it again. Okay, and this time I want quite a large bevel. I'll just expand that out so it's like so. Okay, perfect. And I'm just going to go up to display polygons, edges, and make sure I've got hard edges on this thing. I have. Okay, there we go. So there is the piece for the claw. Now to duplicate it around, of course, we just select it. And you know, to be honest with you, these look fine because they're such a small component. But again, if I'd wanted that hard edge on them, I would have had to start it off with geometry with more subdivisions, so like I did here. And you know, this is repurposed geometry that we used by using the smooth function and then cutting out some faces and using those. So let's just duplicate this around the model before we call this part quits. So Control G to group this, and then once again we'll need to move its pivot. So insert. Now we know it's at the center of the grid. We know it starts the pivot point for the group. We'll know it starts at the origin of the grid. So if I just select this group and I'll call these, not sure, claw holder for want of a better word, all I have to do is get this in the center of the sphere. So there is our sphere center on that axis, and here it is on this axis. Okay, so I'm going to select everything in this group like so. Its pivot point is here, so I just have to go now, edit, duplicate special. Okay, rotate is 120, scale is 1, number of copies is 2, duplicate specials, so just put those on for me. Magic. And they're even pretty much in the perfect place. Looks like we missed it by a millimeter, but not to worry. We'll just select the claw holder group and just move it a little bit. I'll center the pivot on the group, and then it can just be moved, tweaked if you will, ever so slightly into place. There we go, done. Okay, and this one might have the same issue. Yeah, it does. It's kind of a millimeter out. It's because I didn't take enough time to place the pivot in exactly the right spot, but it's near enough. So in the next part, we come back, we'll look at doing the claws, and then we'll be just about done. So I really hope you've been finding this useful so far, and I'll see you in the next part. Thanks for watching.